Thank you again for joining us for this webinar. I will now pass the presentation to our presenter today, Helen.
Thank you so much, Anam, for covering all of that information. And thank you to everyone for attending. I'm very excited to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, which is welcoming people to the autistic community. On the screen, there is a colorful book cover that says "Welcome to the Autistic Community" with two individuals sitting back to back, one on a phone and one on a computer. This is a book that was published this year by the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network with tons of information for people looking to get involved in the autistic community as autistic individuals or as non-autistic allies. And I also have some decorative icons on the screen. As an introduction, I'll be sharing what is the autistic community and who is involved in the autistic community, talk briefly about the history of the autistic community, talk about some community beliefs and preferences, and talk more about how you can get involved. And for some background on myself, my name is Helen Rottier. I am a PhD student in disability studies at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I'm also the student coordinator of the Chicago Coalition of Autistic and Neurodivergent Students, which is an in-person and online community for students and young professionals who are autistic, neurodivergent, or exploring their neurodivergent identity. On the screen, there is a picture of myself. I am a young white woman with short blonde hair and glasses, wearing silver earrings and a patterned shirt. When we talk about the autistic community, it's important to remember that disability is a culture and a community. Disability has cultural values and insights, and the community formed around disability is one that is rich in sharing and kinship and the fight for disability justice. The autistic community specifically is a community advocating for the civil rights and self-determination for all autistic people, and includes organizations, in-person community, and online community. On the screen, I have logos for Autism Network International, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, Thinking Person's Guide to Autism, the logo for AutChat, which is a weekly Twitter chat, and #ActuallyAutistic. So these are just some of the organizations and online community spaces that make up the autistic community broadly. Who is the autistic community? The autistic community includes autistic people and non-autistic allies. And I've included these as two separate bullets because I think it's important to recognize that autistic people are at the center and in leadership of the autistic community. Non-autistic allies play an important role in connecting autistic people, providing resources and spaces for the autistic community, and supporting autistic community endeavors, including activism, community gatherings. For instance, this week we have the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network Annual Gala, and there are so many components of an event like that, especially pivoting to virtual in our new pandemic world, that require assistance from allies, even though autistic people are at the helm. The autistic community is intersectional, and should be welcoming of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, of LGBTQ plus people, of people with multiple disabilities, people from every nationality and citizenship status, people from every religion and spirituality. So we try to keep the community really open and welcoming to people who are similar to ourselves and different from ourselves. And the autistic community is also inclusive of people who are not diagnosed, people with co-occurring disabilities, people with all levels of support needs, and autistic cousins. Autistic cousins are people who have similar neurodivergent conditions like ADHD, hydrocephalus, or other conditions. And we want all of those people to feel welcome in the autistic community as well. As a brief history of the autistic community, I have some points on the slide, but in the 1980s and 90s, this is when autistic people really began connecting with one another through the early internet, writing letters, and in person, largely at autism conferences where they would seek each other out because they were surrounded by parents and professionals and wanted to find spaces where they could be themselves and not feel kind of gawked at these conferences. In 1992, Jim Sinclair founded the Autism Network International, which was a big part of these organized efforts, including listservs, pen pal initiatives, and in-person gatherings. In 1996, the first Autreat was held. Autreat was a conference for the autistic community. It was open to autistic people and non-autistic allies, and gave way to conferences like Autscape and Autspace, which are similar conferences that are still held today in the US and the UK. In 2006, Ari Ne'eman founded the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, which is one of the largest national autistic community organizations. And today, autistic people continue to build community online and offline. And I'll talk a little more about opportunities to get involved and connected with the autistic community online and offline. There are some community beliefs that are common to the autistic community, and autistic people have different beliefs, priorities, and preferences. Every autistic person is different and everyone's experience is valid. However, there are some common beliefs that unite the community. First, that autism is not a disease and does not need to be cured. Second, that autism is a disability. And this follows along the lines of the social model of disability, which posits that the individual difference within a person is not inherently disabling, but that the built environment and barriers in the built environment create disability. By ameliorating those barriers, we can create more equitable opportunities for people that have impairments or differences. Autism is not a tragedy. We see the tragedy rhetoric come up a lot in different organizations or different research models that posit that autism is an epidemic that's growing and needs to be stopped. But in the autistic community, we believe that autism is not a tragedy and is just another way of being. everyone thinks and everyone communicates. This is really a key part of the community. We believe that everyone, including people with intellectual disability, thinks and has worthwhile thoughts, and that everyone, including non-speaking people, people who use augmentative alternative communication, people who stim or sign, everyone communicates. And finally, that neurodiversity is for everyone. So neurodiversity is the idea that autism, while it is a disability, it is also a normal variation of different minds and different ways of processing and interacting with the world. And that neurodiversity really accounts for every type of mind, including people who have higher support needs, including people who have co-occurring intellectual disability, and including people who are non-speaking. There are some other community preferences that come up in the autistic community. The first is related to language. And you may have noticed that I've been saying autistic person, autistic people, and autistic community throughout the presentation. This is an example of identity-first language. And identity-first language is widely regarded as the preference of the community. Opposing identity-first language, or in addition to identity-first language, is person-first language, when we would say person with autism, people with autism, communities of people with autism. And in a lot of spaces, person-first language is emphasized, and person-first language has a really important history coming from the person-first movement of people with intellectual disabilities. And in the wider disability community, both identity-first and person-first language are used and valued by different stakeholders and different, specific disability communities. But in the autistic community, identity-first language is the preference. On the screen, I also have two images. The first is of the rainbow neurodiversity symbol. And while this symbol isn't specific to the autistic community, it is a symbol that is widely regarded as acceptable, in contrast to the puzzle piece icon. Many people in the autistic community believe that the puzzle piece is demeaning, and it portrays us as mysterious or missing a piece. So the puzzle piece is less popular among the autistic community. You may be wondering why you should get involved in the autistic community, whether you're an autistic person or a clinician or parent or ally in general. But communities and social support promote well-being through friendship, belonging, and personal growth. An autistic community can also be a source of solidarity and advocacy. So the autistic community really creates connections that lead to these opportunities to fight for disability justice, to fight for equal opportunities, and create social support. In a recent study that I conducted for my master's thesis, I found that belonging to communities was a facilitator of autistic and neurodivergent college students' well-being and success in college, and that many students specifically noted belonging to autistic, neurodivergent, and disability communities as a facilitator or as a positive aspect of their college experience. On the screen, I have an emoji surrounded by hearts. So there are lots of different ways that you can get involved with the autistic community. I'm going to start with online community. An online community is especially valued in the autistic community because it connects people across distance and because online communication is typically valued and more effective for autistic and neurodivergent people. There's a little bit more flexibility with online communication. It can be more direct, and it can and because it's text-based, it's also preferable to autistic and neurodivergent people. So to get involved with the online community, I recommend that you join Facebook groups. It's important to look for groups that are going to be open to you. So like I said before, non-autistic allies have a really important place in the community, but there are going to be some groups that are intended only for autistic or neurodivergent people. At the same time, there are groups that welcome anyone. So just be aware when you're looking for groups to join, kind of what slot you fit in and how your participation in the group may be affecting other people. There are groups about almost every topic. You can find groups about special interests. You can find groups about AAC. You can find groups about anything that you are interested in. The second point to get involved in the online community is to read blogs. There are so many blogs out there, and it's a great way to get to know what issues are important to the community and what's going on. Tweet using hashtags #ActuallyAutistic or AllAutistics. It's important to note that Actually Autistic is reserved for people who identify as autistic and not for allies, but allies can also use the hashtag #AskingAutistics to ask a question or seek input. So that one is preferable for parents, clinicians, and non-autistic allies. And join Twitter chats like AutChat. Again, AutChat is intended for autistic people and autistic cousins, but you can kind of watch what people are saying on the hashtag and, chime in with a disclaimer as long as you aren't taking up that community space. As far as in-person community goes, you can find opportunities to interact with other autistic people and allies. There are lots of opportunities to do this online, and it's really about bringing those online connections into in-person spaces, which can be difficult, especially in the present moment, but it's something to think about. And the book that I referenced earlier, the Welcome to the Autistic Community, has great information about starting an advocacy group or starting an in-person group of some kind to build community. Participate in advocacy and acceptance campaigns. This can be doing things individually that connect you to the community, like writing letters or making phone calls to elected officials, or it can be participating in larger advocacy and acceptance actions, and to join autism organizations or start your own. I will be talking a little bit about the Coalition for Autistic and Neurodivergent Students and how we got that started in the Chicago area. There are similar organizations and groups across the country, and you can start your own community spaces based on what your needs and the needs of the people in your life are. Before I move to questions, I wanted to share some resources. So you can use meetup.com or Facebook to find in-person community opportunities. You can also use Facebook, like I said, to find those online groups where you can connect with people. Check out existing organizations for community events online and offline. I mentioned the ASAN Gala that's happening this weekend that is all virtual and includes some Zoom events, some Twitter chats, an Animal Crossing Island tour that'll be streamed on YouTube. So lots of different fun stuff going on there. And you can check out other organizations like TAP or Grupo Salto to find events and community spaces. And I highly recommend that you read that Welcome to the Autistic Community from ASAN to learn more. That book has a lot of information about what the community is and means, and also how to get involved in the community. And now I'll take questions, but first I just want to highlight that my contact information is on the screen. You can email me at hrotti2@uic.edu or connect with me on Twitter at Helen Rottier. Like I've shared, I'm a big fan of Twitter as a community space for the autistic and neurodivergent communities, but also for the disability community broadly, and for academic communities, and all different ways to connect there. So I encourage you to connect with me on Twitter if that's something that you do. And otherwise, I'm ready to take questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Helen, for an awesome presentation. We do have a few questions. One of them is, I thought we should always use person first language unless the speaker wanted to otherwise.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And that's something that's emphasized in a lot of educational spaces and clinical spaces. And that's why I bring it up, is because actually among autistic people, the preference is largely autistic first language or identity first language. It's similar in the deaf community, that deaf people prefer to be called deaf people with a capital D. And so I think that's why I emphasize that it is different than what you've probably heard. And obviously, if an individual prefers person first, then that is valid too. But the community as a whole prefers identity first language.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering that. Okay, the other question we have is, you mentioned the Coalition for Autistic and Neurodivergent Students. Can you tell us a little bit more about this community?
Yes. So the Coalition for Autistic and Neurodivergent Students was originally a support group for autistic and neurodivergent students at UIC. But we've kind of taken it and reclaimed it as a community and peer support space. So I opened up the group to students from across universities and colleges in the Chicago area. And actually right now, because we're meeting virtually, we occasionally have visitors from colleges and universities across the country. So that's really interesting. And we meet once or twice a month. Right now we're meeting virtually because of the pandemic. And it's really an opportunity for students to be in community and to share with one another what they're struggling with, what they've been working on, or what goals they have, what they have going on in their lives, and also to share resources that they've accessed that have worked well for them, to share strategies. So it's a form of mentorship in a community space, and students also participate in activities together, work on group projects around acceptance and advocacy, get together to do fun things as a group. One of my favorite things that we've done this year has been special interest fairs, during which time every student is allowed to present on whatever topic they are interested in. So this year we've had some really great presentations on if Disney princesses were Pokemon trainers, and if or the literary origins of Batman, and a specific Sony ice hockey video game. So just really fascinating topics that students get really excited about presenting, and then the students get even more excited about hearing from their friends about what topic they find interesting. So CANS is, like I said, is open to any student or young professional. We do have some students who have graduated and continue to be in community with us, so it's open to young adults who are working or looking for work or not working or applying to college. We just ask that they be 18 or older, and that's kind of what we have going on for CANS. If you want more information, definitely email me and reach out to me because I can share that with you.
Thank you. Those are all so fun. We have a question. What are some challenges that you're hearing about since the pandemic started?
Yeah, there are definitely issues with the pandemic interfering with, especially in-person community spaces. CANS was meeting in person before the pandemic, and luckily switching to online has gone so well that when we're able to meet in person again, we're going to adopt kind of a hybrid where we meet once a month in person and once a month remotely or virtually. But I know that for some groups that it isn't the case that every group has been able to switch to online effectively. And it can be really difficult for some people, especially when their time in community is their time to interact with others like them, and they really rely on that social opportunity and social support. So I know issues with routines being disrupted have been a big part of the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic, and then issues with social isolation, especially for people who don't have access to technology or who haven't had opportunities to use technology to connect with others. So I think it'll be great when the pandemic is kind of over to get back to community spaces that we believe in. But there's also potential for new ways of trying things out and incorporating those into our existing community spaces.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering that. We have a comment and a question. I love this presentation. Thank you. I'm especially grateful to learn about autistic cousins. Do you have any advice about spaces for people who are thinking through their relationship to autistic identity to ask all of their questions about, do I count?
Yeah, that's huge. And I want anyone who is in that position to know that, yes, you count. That's why I emphasized at the beginning that people who are not diagnosed or who are exploring this identity are part of the community. And even if they become part of the community and realize later that maybe this isn't the space for them, or they are thinking through different identity categories, or thinking through different, alternatives, that they were part of the community for that time and they were welcome in the community for that time. So just really emphasizing that in the same way that we do for people who are thinking through their disability identity, and sharing with them that, yes, they are welcome, yes, they belong, yes, they can be part of this space, and really opening those doors for them, because that's how almost everyone gets involved, is by, even people who are diagnosed don't just automatically become part of this community. They have to kind of be welcomed in and explore it a little bit. And that can be really overwhelming and intimidating, but it's also really valuable when you find the community spaces that really speak to you. I had the opportunity to attend the Autism Campus Inclusion Program through the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, which is a program held for college students every summer in DC. And you learn about creating community spaces, and you learn a lot about advocacy, and you get to advocate for policies on Capitol Hill. And it was an amazing opportunity for all of the educational value, but more importantly for the community value. And I made lifelong friends who understood parts of me that other people hadn't, who were willing to engage with me on a different level of community. So really valuing the journey that it takes to become part of the community is how I would approach that for all people, and recognizing that even if you feel you don't count or don't belong, you won't know until you kind of explore that space, and you're welcome to explore it, even if the answer turns out to be, no, I'm not autistic, or I don't think this is the space for me.
Lovely. Thank you for answering. We've got a lot of great questions, and I'm trying to get through all of them. The next question we have is for young people in elementary school age who are autistic. Are there any organizations that are similar to the coalition that you're speaking about that clinicians could connect them with to build community and meet with peers?
For young people who are autistic, are there any similar to the coalition you're speaking about? So I'm familiar with Grupo Salto, which is also through the Institute on Disability and Human Development, and through the family clinic here. So I'm not as familiar with groups for younger people, especially elementary school age, but I would encourage clinicians to just do a little bit of research on family groups. I'm originally from Wisconsin, and I know that the Autism Society of South Central Wisconsin has some family groups as well as some young adult groups, and opportunities for kids to get together and opportunities for parents to get together. So I would look into organizations like Chicagoland Autism Connection and TAP and see what they're offering. And if there aren't spaces like that, to reach out to me and I can help you get something started, because I think it is really valuable, especially for younger kids, to meet other autistic kids and engage with them.
That's wonderful. And your email and your Twitter handle is here. We have another question about the coalition. Does this group have any interest or activities related to advocacy? Yes.
So before the pandemic happened, we were working on several events for Neurodiversity Celebration Week, which is held in March. It was right as everything kind of shut down. We had to cancel those events. But this year, or next March, we're looking at doing some things virtually so that we can still engage people in Neurodiversity Celebration Week and educate students and staff and faculty at all of our colleges and universities about what neurodiversity means and how it shows up in the classroom. The students also take on different, kind of pick up different advocacy projects and bring them to the group. So we've written postcards for Stop the Shock at the Judge Rotenberg Center in Massachusetts. That was a really exciting activity because it was one of our early advocacy activities. And it was exciting to see students get excited about advocacy. And as things come up, the group is open to advocating for different policy changes. For if the group had been in place, I think we would have been part of the campaign to open the Disability Cultural Center on campus, but we're so grateful that it exists and for our partnership with them. So yes, definitely the group has done some advocacy work in the past, and we're always looking for opportunities to do more work in the future. So again, if you have ideas about that, you can connect with me and share with me what you're thinking.
Thank you. Do you have any recommendations? We have a question for evaluators for teens in the Chicago area, preferably someone who can do comprehensive neuropsycho exams.
So I don't have a good grasp on clinicians in the Chicago area, especially because I'm not working in a clinical setting right now. But I would recommend checking out the UIC Family Clinic through DHD, or contacting Illinois LEND. And if you connect with me, I can connect you with LEND, because LEND should have a good idea of some evaluators.
Yeah, I think those are great options. We have another question about your favorite blog related to this topic.
Yeah. So Autistic Hoya by Lydia X.Z. Brown. I'll just type that in the chat because spelling. Chat. And then, so if you just search Autistic Hoya or Lydia X.Z. Brown, you can find that. And then I'm just searching quickly for one of my other favorites. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. This is actually the blog of a friend of mine who does incredible work and presentations and blog posts about using augmentative alternative communication and about the intersection of queer identity and autistic identity. And then I'm not very good at keeping up my blog, but I'll plug it here. So I'll put that in the chat. Again, I'm not very good at keeping up with posting on my blog, especially as I navigate grad school, but I do have a few posts about different things that I've done. I have some posts about what it was like to be in autistic community space at the Autism Campus Inclusion Program, and some posts about different conferences I've gone to, so we have that.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for all of those resources. We have another question. I want to get involved, but I'm not totally comfortable or I'm shy. What tips do you have for me?
Yeah, that can be really intimidating and challenging, especially because so many of these communities are really close-knit. Once people get involved, that they start to be, really close to one another and form friendships really quickly, because it is nice to be in space with people who understand you and who you kind of work well with. So I think be yourself, as cliche as that sounds, and be open to trying something new, even if you're worried that it might not work. Because the worst thing that happens is that you try something and it doesn't work out, and maybe you lost an hour of your life, and maybe it was a little intimidating. But on the flip side, it could turn out that you find a place in this community, and that can be really supportive and engaging and create opportunities. So I think just giving things a try, and trying lots of different things. So even if one thing doesn't end up working out, being open to trying something new or something different. And I know that's all much easier said than done, but also recognizing that these people may have similar struggles and want to be there for you, and want you to be comfortable.
Thank you so much. I think those are all the questions we have for today. Thank you so much, Helen, for all of that wonderful information. Thank you, everyone, for joining this webinar today. This webinar is sponsored by the Institute on Disability and Human Development and the Leadership Education Neurodevelopmental Disabilities Program, blend program that Helen talked about at the UIC Department on Disability and Human Development, as well as the Autism Program of Illinois. Funding is provided in part by the Autism Program of Illinois and the Illinois Department of Human Services. Stay tuned for all of our wonderful webinars coming up in the future. Thank you.